Many marriages fail, not from betrayal, but from polite performances. Masks keep the peace, while the soul suffocates. Take off the mask, or the marriage will.
50% of marriages end in divorce. But here's the darker truth. Many in the other 50% secretly wish they could. They sit across from each other at dinner tables, scrolling their phones instead of talking. They sleep in the same bed, but live in different worlds. Strangers bound only by a mortgage and a last name. I once heard a man in his late 50s whisper, almost ashamed, "We haven't spoken about anything real in years. We just coexist. No fights, no dramatic explosions, just silence." And yet that silence was more painful than any argument could be. Carl Jung, the psychologist who mapped the depths of the human soul, offered a piercing explanation for this kind of emptiness. He believed that what we often call romantic love is not the eternal bond we imagine, but a projection of our inner world onto another person. We fall in love not with who they truly are, but with who we believe them to be. And when the projection fades, when the chemical euphoria of new love dissolves, what remains is the uncomfortable task of facing the real person behind the illusion. Stay with me until the end of this video, and together we will uncover why marriages so often collapse, why the lie of love seduces us into promises we hardly can keep, and how Jung psychology, alongside modern neuroscience, reveals both the madness and the meaning in our search for connection. By the end, you will not only understand why so many relationships crumble, you will gain a deeper sense of what it means to love with honesty, depth, and awareness. Before we begin, if this topic touches something inside you, if you've ever wondered why marriages fall apart or questioned the nature of love itself, I invite you to like this video and subscribe to my channel, Jungian Mind Shift. Now, let's step into the first story that reveals how marriages unravel from within.
In one of Carl Jung's early studies, he observed a couple who had been married for more than 20 years. On the surface, their life looked stable. They had a home, children, and the quiet routines that come with middle age. But beneath this calm exterior was a tension so deep it was almost invisible until it finally broke them apart. The husband was a respected businessman, proud of his role as provider. The wife, once vibrant and full of creative energy, had slowly grown silent. Jung noticed that when they sat together, the air was heavy, as if every sentence was filtered before it reached the other. He wrote that what truly haunted this marriage was not betrayal or conflict, but the failure to see and accept the other as a whole person. Each lived beside a projection, not a partner. At the beginning of their love, the wife had seen in her husband a figure of strength, someone who would protect her from the chaos of the world. The husband, in turn, saw in her the ideal of warmth and nurturing, the feminine image that comforted his restless spirit. But over time, those projections dissolved. He discovered she carried her own ambitions and frustrations, while she realized his strength was mixed with fear and doubt. What once looked like perfection now looked like a mask. Jung warned that when a marriage is built only on these unconscious projections, it cannot last. The moment reality begins to intrude, the moment we see the flaws behind the fantasy, the bond begins to fracture. The couple he studied did not survive that revelation. They separated, not because they hated each other, but because they had never truly met each other in the first place. And here lies the paradox that Jung highlighted. The very illusion that draws two people together in passion often becomes the force that drives them apart. The question is, what happens after the mask falls? Can two people learn to truly see each other, or do they retreat into loneliness, even within the same marriage? Imagine the first months of falling in love. Your heart races when you see their name light up your phone. Your mind circles endlessly around them, unable to focus on work or sleep. Everything feels brighter, sharper, almost unreal. Modern neuroscience shows us why. The brain in those first stages of romance floods with dopamine, oxytocin, and serotonin. This cocktail creates euphoria, obsession, and a kind of blindness. You cannot see your partner's flaws because your body is designed to hide them from you. It feels like destiny, but in reality, you are high. Carl Jung would say, this madness of love is not a mistake, it is nature's trick. The psyche uses projection to bind us to another person. The man sees in the woman not just her face, but the anima, his inner image of the feminine. The woman sees in the man not just his presence, but the animos, her inner image of the masculine. Archetypes awaken in the unconscious, and suddenly this one person carries all the weight of your longing, your dreams, your hidden self. But what happens when the chemicals fade? When dopamine no longer floods your body at the sound of their voice, when oxytocin no longer blinds you with tenderness, and serotonin no longer softens their flaws? What happens when the projection dissolves and you are left not with a symbol, but a human being? This is the silent turning point in so many marriages. The spark dies down, the chemicals fade, the illusions collapse. Do you recognize the real person sitting across from you, or do you resent them for no longer embodying your dream? Do you learn to see, or do you turn away, searching for that chemical madness in someone else? For Jung, this is where true love begins, not in the intoxication of projection, but in the sobering courage of meeting reality. The question is, how many couples survive that transition?
Carl Jung once wrote, "There is always some madness in love, but there is also always some reason for madness." He understood what modern neuroscience now confirms, that the intoxication of early romance is not designed to last forever. Its purpose is not lifelong bliss, but to bring two people close enough to commit. After that, the illusion must collapse. And in the collapse, the real work begins. Ancient wisdom echoes this paradox. The Taoists said, "What is soft overcomes what is hard." In love, the softness of illusion draws us together, but only by facing the hard truths of imperfection can we remain. The Greeks too knew this duality. Eros inflames, but agape sustains. Passion is the spark, but endurance is the fire. Jung believed that when we confuse the spark for the fire, we set ourselves up for despair. We cling to the high of infatuation and call it love. But love that endures, he said, is not born in ecstasy, it is forged in shadow. Only when the darkness of disappointment meets the light of forgiveness does something deeper emerge. So ask yourself, have you mistaken the fleeting madness for the whole story? Have you believed that the loss of passion means the death of love? Or could it be that losing the dream is the doorway to finding reality? The paradox is this: in losing the illusion, we gain the truth. In the death of infatuation, the possibility of authentic connection is born. But only if we are willing to walk through the shadow rather than run from it. The cost of this misunderstanding is immense. When couples mistake the natural decline of neurochemicals for the death of love, they believe something is broken that cannot be repaired. Instead of seeing the shift as an invitation to deeper intimacy, they interpret it as failure. The spark fades, and with it, the hope that they chose the right partner. How many marriages collapse not because love truly died, but because people did not recognize this transition for what it was? To avoid conflict, many begin to suppress their authentic selves. They smile when they want to cry. They agree when they long to protest. They play the role of harmony while their spirit quietly withers. Jung called this a form of psychic death, a slow suffocation of the soul. When we kill our own truth to maintain appearances, the marriage becomes not a union of two whole beings, but a performance of masks. Resentment soon follows. Every compromise begins to feel like a sacrifice, every silence like a betrayal. The very walls of the home, once filled with laughter, become charged with tension. Partners who once reached for each other's hands now feel the weight of chains instead of warmth. The soul cannot bear such bondage forever. And so the rebellion begins. Some seek escape through infidelity, desperate for the rush of chemicals that once made them feel alive. Others choose divorce, tearing apart families not out of hatred, but out of a refusal to continue living in this quiet death. What looks like betrayal is often simply the psyche's last attempt to survive. Jung understood that when love is reduced to duty without a soul, the individual eventually revolts against their partner, against the institution, against themselves. The tragedy is not that marriages fail, but that so many fail for reasons that could be understood and transformed. The cost of misunderstanding love is not only broken relationships, it is spiritual suicide, the loss of authenticity, and the silent erosion of trust in love itself.
When we step back and look at the larger picture, the pattern becomes clear. Marriage, as it is often practiced, is built on the illusion of permanence. We take the temporary madness of infatuation, mistake it for eternal love, and then bind ourselves with vows meant to last a lifetime. The result is a cycle almost every couple encounters. First, the intoxication of passion, then the slow withdrawal of chemicals, followed by compromises that silence the self, and finally, the resentment that builds until it bursts in anger or quiet separation. Carl Jung warned us that the psyche cannot survive long inside a lie. When the institution of marriage is grounded in projection rather than reality, it becomes brittle. At first, it looks beautiful, like glass catching the light, but one small crack and the whole structure shatters. Love that begins with blindness often ends in despair, unless the couple dares to open their eyes and meet each other honestly once the illusions fade. This is not simply a private matter between two people. It is a universal principle. Human beings across cultures repeat the same cycle because the same unconscious forces are at play. Biology gives us chemicals to push us together, but psychology demands that we evolve beyond them if we wish to remain. To stay in love is not to preserve the intoxication of youth, but to discover a new kind of seeing, a new kind of union that can survive disillusionment. So the question becomes, for you watching now, have you ever mistaken the fading of infatuation for the end of love, when in truth it might have been the beginning of something deeper? Modern research confirms what Jung intuited long before brain scans existed. Neuroscientists have shown that the intoxicating chemistry of early love has a shelf life. Dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, all the hormones that flood us with euphoria usually peak and fade within 18 to 24 months. Nature designed this phase not to last forever, but to be just long enough to bond us, to draw us into family and continuity. After that, biology steps back, and the real psychological work begins. The statistics are merciless. Around half of marriages end in divorce, a figure that has become almost a cliché. But what is often left unspoken is the fate of the other half. Many couples do not divorce formally, yet live trapped in marriages that are emotionally dead. They remain together for appearances, for finances, for children, or out of fear of loneliness.
Outwardly, they preserve the institution, but inwardly, they inhabit a quiet prison. Sociologists studying long-term marriage satisfaction have found that dissatisfaction often begins not with betrayal, but with the slow erosion of connection after the initial passion fades. When partners are unprepared for this transition, they mistake the natural decline of infatuation for failure, and so they withdraw further from each other. One study even described this as the long goodbye, a gradual unraveling where two people stop being lovers and slowly become housemates. All of this confirms Jung's insight. The greatest danger in marriage is not conflict, but unconsciousness. When people do not understand the nature of love's chemical arc, they misinterpret its fading as the death of the relationship rather than the chance to enter a deeper stage. The science supports what the psychology already knew: the first high is not meant to last, and it is not supposed to.
At the heart of the problem lies a mechanism as old as humanity itself. Love functions like a drug. The first encounter, the rush of attraction, is a state of intoxication. Every look, every touch feels amplified, almost sacred. Yet, just as with any drug, the effect is temporary. We build the most serious contract of our lives while under this influence. Marriage vows are often spoken at the peak of this high, when dopamine and oxytocin are whispering promises through our blood. In that state, forever feels possible. But forever is a word the chemicals cannot sustain. Carl Jung would call this the trick of nature. Passion is not a moral flaw or a human weakness. It is an evolutionary design. Its purpose is reproduction, not lifelong compatibility. Passion brings people together with overwhelming force, but it was never intended to keep them bound for decades. The psyche mistakes a temporary madness for eternal truth, and society reinforces the mistake by sanctifying it into marriage. The danger is not simply that passion fades. The danger is that we cling to the expectation that it should last, and when it doesn't, we feel betrayed. Partners blame each other, believing the love has died or that they chose the wrong person, when in fact the high has merely done its work and stepped aside. This misunderstanding is the root of so many broken homes and broken spirits. The real question, then, is not how to keep the drug alive, but how to build something real once its effects wear off. Can two people move from projection to perception, from intoxication to awareness, from chemistry to choice? That is the challenge, and failing to face it is why marriages so often dissolve into resentment or despair. If we look closely, the unraveling of marriage often follows a pattern, almost like chapters in a book that too many couples unknowingly write. The first chapter is what we might call the chemical madness phase. Here, the body is intoxicated, the psyche projects its deepest fantasies, and commitments are made with a sense of certainty that feels divine. People marry, move in together, promise eternity, all while under the influence of what is essentially a temporary storm of chemistry and archetypes. Then comes the tolerance phase. Just as the body adapts to any drug, the thrill of passion begins to dull. Flaws emerge where once there was perfection. Habits that once felt endearing now irritate. The sparkle fades from daily life, and the beloved is revealed not as a savior, but as a human being. This is the moment of truth, but too often it is misread as failure rather than transition. In response, many couples enter the compromise phase. Instead of confronting the disillusionment openly, they suppress their true feelings to preserve harmony. They bite their tongues, silence their longings, and bury their disappointments. Outwardly, peace appears intact, but inwardly, the soul is suffocating. Jung warned that when we betray our authentic self, we commit a kind of spiritual suicide. The marriage becomes not a union of two living beings, but a performance of roles. Finally, the pressure builds to the explosion phase. Resentment that has been buried for years erupts in anger, affairs, or sudden withdrawal. What looks stable from the outside collapses overnight, leaving both partners stunned at how quickly love could turn to ashes. Divorce is often the legal expression of this explosion, but even without paperwork, countless marriages remain broken in spirit long before they are broken on paper. These stages are not destiny, but they are common. They reveal how predictable the arc of many marriages is when we confuse chemistry for love and illusion for truth. The deeper question is whether we can recognize the stages as they unfold and choose another path before the explosion arrives.
The risks of remaining unconscious in marriage are profound. The first and perhaps most devastating is the loss of self. In the effort to keep peace, many people abandon their own dreams, passions, and individuality. They stop painting, stop traveling, stop pursuing the work or hobbies that once gave their lives meaning. Slowly, they shrink themselves to fit the role of spouse, thinking the sacrifice is love. But the consequence is a hollow kind of existence. Emptiness sets in, and with it resentment. The partner who once felt like a source of life begins to feel like a prison guard, even if they never intended to play that role. The second risk is what Nietzsche and Jung would both recognize as a form of slave morality within relationships. Stability is worshipped as the highest virtue, even when it is sterile and lifeless. Couples congratulate themselves for enduring, for not divorcing, for staying under one roof. But beneath that endurance lies a slow spiritual death. When marriage becomes a performance of stability rather than a dance of truth, the soul begins to wither. What remains is not love, but a hollow echo of what love once was. And then comes the third risk, explosive rebellion. The psyche, starved for authenticity, revolts against the chains of silence. Affairs erupt, often not because of lust alone, but because of desperation to feel alive again. Divorce proceedings begin, custody battles ensue, and entire families fracture under the weight of unresolved pain. The consequence here is not only the destruction of a marriage, but the fragmentation of identity itself. People leave not only their partners, but the selves they once were, emerging from the wreckage unsure of who they are anymore. Each of these risks carries its own devastation, but together they point to a single truth. When love becomes unconscious, when marriage is built on illusion rather than awareness, the cost is not only the loss of a relationship, but the slow erosion of the human spirit. Do you recognize traces of these risks in your own life, or in the lives of those around you? And how do you think one can begin to resist them before it is too late? The way forward does not lie in grand gestures or romantic illusions, but in a transformation of consciousness. It begins with awareness. Love's chemistry, as intoxicating as it feels, was never meant to endure forever. It is a gift that draws two people together, but once it fades, something else must take its place. When we stop confusing infatuation with permanence, we free ourselves from the crushing disappointment that comes when the spark inevitably dims. Instead of asking, "Why has love died?" we can begin to ask, "How can something deeper be built here?" From that awareness comes the need for adjustment. The real work of marriage begins when the masks fall away and we are left with the truth of who our partner really is. To love in this stage is to step into authenticity, not dependency. It means preserving individuality, nurturing one's own passions, and refusing to sacrifice the self in order to keep peace. A relationship rooted in growth allows both people to breathe. Without this, love turns stagnant. Beyond adjustment lies integration. Jung believed that true union does not come from two broken halves searching for completion, but from two whole beings who choose to walk together. In such a bond, both partners remain conscious of their shadows and wounds, yet they embrace each other as equals. Love here is no longer about filling emptiness, it is about sharing abundance. Awareness, adjustment, integration, these are not quick remedies, but lifelong practices. They do not promise a life without conflict, but they create a foundation strong enough to hold the weight of truth. And perhaps that is the true promise of love, not that it spares us from struggle, but that it survives it.
History is full of marriages that reveal the stark contrast between illusion and truth. One of the most tragic examples comes from the life of Leo Tolstoy, the great Russian novelist. Tolstoy and his wife Sofia began their marriage in a blaze of passion and shared purpose. But over the years, the passion curdled into bitterness. He demanded purity and self-sacrifice, while she longed for intimacy and recognition. Their love began with projections. She saw in him a genius to admire. He saw in her the nurturing figure to anchor his restless spirit. But when those projections dissolved, what remained was resentment. Their later years were marked by constant quarrels, mutual recriminations, and the painful collapse of trust. Tolstoy even fled his home in despair at the end of his life, unable to bear the cage their marriage had become. It is a haunting portrait of how the lie of permanence can unravel into hostility when awareness and authenticity are absent. On the other side stands the example of Carl Jung himself. His marriage to Emma was not free of turbulence. Jung's affairs and inner struggles created deep wounds. Yet the union endured, and even grew through them. What distinguished their marriage was not the absence of pain, but the willingness to confront it. Emma did not dissolve into Jung's shadow, nor did Jung pretend to be the flawless figure Emma once imagined. They remained individuals, Emma becoming a powerful analyst in her own right. Yet they also integrated their lives in a way that created a partnership stronger than illusion. Through conflict, betrayal, and healing, their marriage transformed into a laboratory of growth rather than a prison of masks. The contrast is clear. In Tolstoy's case, the collapse of projection led to despair and destruction. In Jung's, the collapse of projection became the doorway to deeper reality. The same moment that ended one marriage gave birth to the evolution of another. It shows us that what happens after the illusions fade is not destiny, it is choice. We have journeyed together through the fragile architecture of love, guided by Jung's insights and illuminated by the paradoxes of philosophy. We have seen how the madness of infatuation binds us, how the fading of chemistry leaves us disoriented, and how the lie of permanence can fracture even the strongest vows. But we have also seen that this collapse is not the end. It can be the beginning, the place where illusion falls away and truth has a chance to emerge. If there is one message to carry with you, it is this. Love is not about finding someone to complete you, but about daring to meet another from the fullness of your own being. When we stop clinging to projections, when we embrace awareness, authenticity, and integration, marriage becomes not a prison, but a path to deeper freedom. If you would like to keep exploring these profound questions of psychology, philosophy, and the human heart, consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel, Jungian Mind Shift. Together, we can continue walking this path towards wisdom, one reflection at a time. Until then, may your search for love lead you not into illusion, but into the kind of truth that makes life worth living.